deltoid. This muscle forms a cap over the shoulder joint, and we will build it in 3 parts. The deltoid's origin is on the scapular spine and clavicle. The point of insertion is on the humerus. The action the deltoid performs is to abduct or raise the humerus. The 3 parts of the deltoid are 3 fairly similar triangles. Build these triangles and use your clay roller to flatten them. We'll make one larger triangle and cut it into 3 pieces. Take your wooden knife and straighten out the edges of the triangle. Then divide the large triangle into 3 smaller triangles. These divisions create the anterior, middle, and posterior deltoid. For the approximate sizes, see the right side of the screen. Now we will mark the attachment sites with extruded clay tubes. Mark off the posterior deltoid along the scapular spine from the corner of the acromion to almost the medial edge of the scapula for the origin. It will be a thin line of clay. And for the insertion, take a pinch of clay and place it on the deltoid tuberosity of the humerus. All 3 heads will converge at this point. Mark the origin of the middle deltoid, which is the lateral edge of the acromion, and the lateral edge of the clavicle with another small string of clay. Take another pinch of clay and mark the insertion point of the humerus slightly lower than the first point. Finally, the anterior deltoid's origin will be on the lateral third of the clavicle, so place a clay string there, and then mark the insertion on the lowest point of the deltoid tuberosity. Now we can attach the muscle. Take the posterior deltoid and attach it to the point of origin along the scapular spine, reaching to the insertion point on the humerus. Next, take the middle deltoid from the origin point of the acromion and the clavicle to the insertion point, the deltoid tuberosity. Finally, take the anterior head and attach it to the lateral clavicle at its point of origin, and then to the deltoid tuberosity, the insertion point. Notice the muscles do not cover the spine of the scapula or the clavicle, but rather come off the ends of the bone. Now we will draw the muscle fibers. Draw a tendinous line near the point of all three triangles, and then, using your wooden knife, draw angled lines converging at the points of each of the triangles. Now we will build the Sartorius. Roll out a very long, slender tube of clay. The Sartorius's origin is on the ilium. The Sartorius's insertion point is on the proximal tibia. And the Sartorius's action is to flex the thigh on the hip. This muscle has to reach from the pelvic bone all the way down to the knee. Trim the correct length to about 10 3/4 inches by 3/4 inches. Flatten it slightly with the roller. Now we are going to draw on the fibers with our wooden knife before placing it on the mannequin model. Draw 2 lines across the very top and bottom of the muscle to show the tendons. Then draw long parallel lines along the middle of the muscle to show the fibers. The origin of this muscle will be the ilium or the hip bone. More technically, the point is the anterior superior iliac spine of the pelvic bone. You can mark this point with a clay dot. And then the point of insertion is on the proximal tibia. So place a line of clay there. Now placing the muscle. Attach it first at the ilium or hip and run it down to the insertion point of the proximal tibia. The muscle goes behind the knee and then on a diagonal up to the origin on the pelvic bone. So the muscle makes an S shape. That is an artifact of humans' upright posture. The action of this muscle is to flex the thigh on the hip. The last muscle we will create is the pectoralis major. We will build this in 3 parts. It consists of 3 fleshy triangles of muscle. When making the triangles, roll out a large clay carrot and flatten it with your hand. The first triangle's perimeter is 3 by 3 by 2 inches. The second triangle's perimeter is 3.5 by 3.5 by 1.5 inches. You can also use the wooden knife to trim the triangles. Switch from using your hands to the clay roller to flatten your triangles. Roll out another carrot for your third triangle. Then flatten it with both your hands and the wooden roller. Pectoralis major is the muscle associated with bench presses and push-ups. And cut it with the wooden knife. The third triangle has a perimeter of about 3 by 3 by 2 inches. Now we will mark the origin of the pectoralis major along the rib cage. The first part of the pectoralis is the abdominal, which attaches to ribs 5, 6, and 7. The second part runs up along the sternum, and the third part attaches to the medial 2/3 of the clavicle. Attach these 3 strings of clay now. For the insertion point, you will need 3 very short strings. Place these 3 strings along the lateral edge of the tubercular groove of the humerus, working their way down to the deltoid tuberosity. Now we are ready to attach the muscle. The first part of the pectoralis major comes from the lowest point on the origin on the rib cage to the highest point on the humerus. The second part comes from the sternum and crosses over the lower or abdominal part, and then attaches to the middle line on the humerus. And the third part attaches at its origin on the clavicle to the lowest clay string on the humerus. So all 3 parts should overlap one another as they reach their insertion point of the tubercular groove of the humerus. You can see the muscle fibers run along each triangle and reach toward the tendinous point of the triangle on the humerus. This concludes our lesson on the skeletal muscles.